Hey everybody, it's Mary here. I just wanted to pop in really quick to say thank you for putting up with all the scheduling snafus that we've been having lately. The show really is just the two of us, and I've just had a lot of stuff going on with my day job and in my personal life that has just had to take precedence over editing. And I know that's probably been kind of frustrating as a listener. And so I'm going to be making a couple tweaks to our schedule to try to fix that. We're still going to be doing one movie per month in 2 parts and releasing every other week. But I am going to be shifting to where new episodes should be coming out on Fridays instead of on Wednesdays. That's just going to give me a little bit more time to edit and make sure that everything is up to the standards that I want it to be. But as always, if you're subscribed in your favorite podcast app, then you're going to get the new episodes whenever they're released. So you don't even have to think about our schedule or worry about it. Thank you so much for listening and supporting this project of ours. We're going to jump right back in with the second half of our discussion of Alice in Wonderland. Welcome to Revisiting the Vault, a podcast where we're looking at the history of art, animation, music, and just about everything else, but through a Disney lens. At this point, I have a big question mark of why she is still very much following this White Rabbit and obsessed with it. First of all, I don't know how many 10-year-olds are that single-minded. Well, it doesn't sound like it. But she's been through a lot already, but she is still just like, no, I am trying to find this damn rabbit. I'm going to keep looking.
It is like the one through line in this movie. It really is the one thing that continues to sort of connect these stories.
Yeah.
And then the White Rabbit shows up at the end.
They have that little bit of the scene at his house.
Yes. And that's really what we're coming up to next.
He thinks that she's Mary Ann. I'm trying to look and see if I made any notes about the voice actor for the White Rabbit, but I didn't make any specific notes about him.
Right.
Most of these actors at this point in this movie, almost all of these little side characters, are being done by, like, actors who have really been in the trenches for a very long time.
Yes.
Vaudeville stalwarts, radio hosts who have hit shows. It's entirely possible that these people would have been very recognized by the audience at the time already.
Right.
And so, I mean, it was just very interesting looking into, like, who some of these people were and what all else they had done.
I'm pretty sure it's the Mad Hatter. He drove the animators bonkers because he kept changing up his lines.
Yeah, the Mad Hatter ad-libbed a lot.
Yeah.
I did read that because the whole thing with the watch was actually ad-libbed, and then Walt Disney thought it was hilarious and was like, animate that. It's not in the script, but animate it. And the animator was like, that's going to be really hard. And then he was like, so?
And? What am I paying you for? Yeah.
What's your point? There are a couple other movies where things like that have happened, where actors for one reason or another have had trouble working on films because their style is more ad-libs.
Yeah.
You would not hire, we'll talk about Robin Williams, obviously, but you don't hire Robin Williams to read a script.
No. Oh man, we will talk about Robin Williams because...
Oh my gosh, there's so much to say about Robin Williams. And there have been quite a few things that I've read about, and even in voice acting. I mean, you would think that voice acting would be a little more relaxed on that kind of thing, but even in voice acting, it is something that people get frustrated with. Directors and actors get frustrated with that mismatch of expectations. Yep. The guy playing the White Rabbit, first of all, as much as his shtick starts to get a little irritating, where he's just like, I'm late. I'm going to get completely distracted by this other task for like 10 minutes.
Yes.
Oh my God, I am also still late. I was like, yeah, that's me. I was like, I am that White Rabbit. But Alice, once again, eats something random.
She got to stop doing that.
The bottle and the cookie in the beginning, in the scene in the doorknob room, it was kind of told to her, like, oh, no, you should drink what's in the bottle. It's going to help you get through the door, But this, she's just like, oh, look, there's a cookie. I'm going to eat it.
Yeah, don't. Don't
do that, especially when the last time you ate a cookie that looked exactly like that one, it made you get bigger.
Yes. At some point, wouldn't you just stop? Learn from your mistakes, child.
We had already eaten them at this point because we ate them in the first scene, but I actually made cookies. I have a cookie cutter that is the eat meat.
Yes, I saw. You sent me the picture. Also, you're welcome to send those cookies to me. It's fine.
But it is something where I'm like, why would you just eat that right then, Alice?
For sure shouldn't.
The story just requires it to be silly. And then they go get the dodo, because apparently the dodo's like the smart guy around. I don't know. I'm not sure entirely why they go get him.
Yeah, I had a problem with all of these characters too.
I'm thinking in the book, you probably understand more that he's like the professor or the smart one.
Yeah.
But in the movie, I'm like, okay. But the dodo is just like, what we need is a lizard with a ladder.
Yep.
Sure. And then a lizard with a ladder is there. And his name is Bill the Lizard.
Yep.
Again, from the book, they did not make him up.
Nope.
Based on a real person. But Am I the only one that got severe Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins vibes from Bill the Lizard?
You are not, but that movie came out in the 60s.
Right. It's later. It's much later.
Yeah.
It's the look. It's a little bit of the accent that the lizard has, but it's the look. Like, he just looks like an anthropomorphized Dick Van Dyke. Mm-hmm. And maybe it is that when they were doing Mary Poppins years later, intentionally or not, that came to mind because it was a chimney sweep. He's not an actual chimney sweep, but it's a character they had in that kind of situation previously in a Disney movie. So,
and also, if you look at the way that lizard moves, yes, to a certain extent, that's the way lizards move. But then you watch something like Monsters, Inc. and you have Randall. That's the same damn lizard. Not at all.
Oh,
but
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, the way he's moving.
I didn't put that together, but it is really similar. And that's what I'm saying with this movie. For as much as neither one of us, like, you hadn't seen it at all, and I hadn't seen it in decades, this movie has its tendrils everywhere.
Yes, totally. This was another one, though, where I was like, something is off. I don't trust any of these characters.
No.
They're not doing anything that you could even hint at being inappropriate. There's nothing creepy about it, but you just, like, you're like, nope, this isn't good.
And it's funny because there's a lot of adaptations of Alice in Wonderland. Well, just that sentence in itself is true, but a lot where either she goes back or she stays longer or something like that. And they very much do it in this tone of, these are her quirky friends.
Yeah.
May as well go ahead and dig into. One of my favorite shows that I watched on the Disney Channel when I was growing up was called Adventures in Wonderland. I only had vague memories of this show before Disney Plus became a thing. Apparently it was in 1992. I would have said it was in the mid-'80s. But then, you know, when I'm doing the research for this, I'm like, let me look this show up. Because I remember this show. It turns out that not only did this show run for multiple seasons, it is on Disney Plus now.
Oh.
So I was like, all right, we're going to do the first episode. We're going to see how bad this is. Because I've gone back and watched some TV shows that I loved as a kid. And some of them are really, they're so bad.
Yeah.
This one was not actually that bad. It was very much a kid's show. It was aimed at like 6 or 7 year olds probably. That one is the only one where I actually really like Tweedledee and Tweedledum because they are a pair of rapping brothers in hammer pants.
Hey, why not?
Because it's the 90s.
It's the 90s.
Oh, and the White Rabbit's running around on rollerblades because it's the 90s.
Of course.
But anyway, the reason that I went on this tangent is because that show is very much, the entire premise of that show is that Alice can go to Wonderland anytime she wants by just walking through the mirror in her bedroom.
Naturally.
And she does it whenever she wants to go visit her friends to like get advice or have a fun time. The episode I watched, she's like, needs to write a story for school. She's supposed to write a story about something interesting, and she has writer's block, so she goes to Wonderland, because that's a place where interesting things are always happening.
True.
Makes sense. And then everybody tries to help her write her story, and it comes out disjointed and strange. My point, though, is that everybody paints this most of the time as Alice having this adventure with these wonderful friends. And again, to go back to Labyrinth, the end of Labyrinth, spoiler alert, there's this whole thing where, like, all of the people from the land where the labyrinth is tell Sarah they're going to be sad that she's going back to the regular world, but if she ever needs them, they'll be there because they're her friends. Mm-hmm. Should you need us? You just have to ask, should you need us? And then she's like, you know what? I do need you. Sometimes for no reason at all. I just need you. I need to have you in my life. And it's this whole symbolism of childhood, needing to hang on to childish imagination and stuff. I could do literally an entire podcast scene by scene about Labyrinth. But that's how people paint Alice in Wonderland, is that the Wonderland characters are her kind friends that she has this adventure with. They're all terrible.
They annoy the shit out of her the whole time.
Almost nobody helps her with anything.
No, they're jerks.
The dodo sings an entire song about setting her on fire.
Yes, and okay, can we talk about the dodo as a character for just a second? Because honestly, I was watching that and I was like, the dodo seems like a late Victorian colonialist who is like, I know how to solve this problem. Let's destroy everything.
Right.
Let's unleash cats on this endangered species of bird that doesn't fly.
Let's bring in the cane toads. It's fine.
The dodo, I mean, like, he's smoking a pipe. He looks like this stereotypical English aristocrat. He's so tweedy and all of that. And it's just like, ugh. And I mean, he might as well also carry a blunderbuss and shoot an elephant while he's there, you know?
I just randomly had to look this up because when you said it, I thought that it was ironic that the dodo is the one giving us these vibes. Because I got them too. Because the dodo the animal went extinct largely because of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The dodo went extinct in 1662-ish.
Yes.
That's the last reliable record of a sighting. So the dodo was already a symbol of that kind of thing. But also then there are the articles that said that the dodo is supposed to be Lewis Carroll.
Right. I saw that too.
Was it intentional? I don't know. This is the first of many scenes where this poor rabbit, at this point, has almost no character.
Yeah.
Except that he's late, which again, I identify with very much. Like, at this point, he is the character that is closest to my heart in this film. But this is the first of several scenes where people are just not listening to that poor rabbit.
I know. I identify with the rabbit for that reason.
The dodo's just like, well, we're going to have to burn the house down. He's like, oh, okay, what? No, you can't burn my house down. Like, no, that was my mother's clock or whatever.
And the dodo was like, nope, it's the only way.
And he's just like literally not even hearing the rabbit at that point. Because he's singing a song about...
Smoke them out.
Smoke the monster out.
Yeah.
Again, that scene, as comical as it is, and again, from the book, can't give Disney all the blame, as comical as it is to see her with her hands and legs sticking out of the house.
Yeah.
Again, it was like, what is this about? Why is this here? What are we learning? That was the whole point of the book, was that they stopped trying to have a point all the time.
Yes, and that was my thing going into watching it. I was like, I don't really know what this story is about. And like, in the broad strokes, I do. Alice goes to Wonderland and then wacky misadventure after wacky misadventure.
Right.
Okay. But the whole time I was like, what is happening? I am the kind of person that expects a linear plot, and you do not get that. I mean, like, I feel like to some extent I'm going to be beating a dead horse every time I say that, because this movie is just full of not that.
I really, really have to force myself to step back and say, like, if that's what I want, this isn't what the movie was trying to give me, and I can't fault it for that.
Right.
I can't be mad at it for being what it said it would be and what it wanted to be.
And for not meeting my made-up expectations.
I think that I still would put it on an I enjoyed it list. It's still going to go on my, like, if I'm making a list of, like, good and bads, it goes on the good side. But it's also totally fine if a movie's just not for you.
Yeah.
And that's something that happens with me with TV shows all the time. I am glad that people have things they enjoy. That is wonderful. It's just not for me. If Alice in Wonderland is just not for you, that's fine. Especially because I think that if you're going to talk about, like, what objectively is or isn't true about it, artistically it's beautiful.
Yes, 100%. She gets out of the house and she goes to the garden, and Golden Afternoon. It's a great song. It's not one that anybody really remembers, but you're listening to it, you're like, oh, this is really a great song, actually.
Yeah, it's got a lot of good harmonizing, there's a lot of good vocals going on. Is that the one where I noted that it's Marnie Noxon?
I believe you did. Yes.
She was uncredited because she's the uncredited ghost singer for, like, a lot of movie musicals that were coming out, like, in that decade and the next. Marnie Nixon. Yeah, I mean, it tracks. She's a wonderful vocalist.
Yes.
It's sung beautifully. The animation is I got super Fantasia vibes from it.
Mm-hmm.
Really enjoyed it. But, I mean, you saw it in my notes where I was like, I don't remember liking the flowers. I remember thinking they were jerks.
And they are. They're like the elephants all over again in Dumbo.
Yeah, because they're just like, oh, what kind of flower are you? And she's like, oh, I'm not a flower. And then it just becomes this whole thing of, like, they say that she's a weed and they have to get rid of her. Technically, the word weed does not have an agricultural definition.
Right.
It is a plant you don't want to have in that area. So this, like, oh, she's a weed. And I'm just like, that's a bunch of dandelions over there.
And I will also say, all of the flower animation was very pretty. They went above and beyond on the tiger lily and the dandelion.
Oh, yeah.
The violets,
Yeah.
The violets were fine, and they totally did like a shrinking violet. Like, you get all of the cliches that they animated into the flowers.
And the red and the white rose and the way that they did those.
But the tiger lily and the dandelion, it was just, yes, that is a tiger lily. And it's really well done, but it's like a short enough on-screen time that you just see it and you sense it and you know it without getting hit over the head with it. I just thought that was really, really great.
When you look at what they've done with other stuff later, they usually are going to use the pansies.
Mm-hmm.
Or the roses, which have very distinctive drawing style. They're very distinctive. They're very beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I guess because they have more lines. Every time I see a pansy, we have flower boxes on our balcony, and we had pansies last year. And that is always, like, as soon as I see one, I think of the pansies in Alice in Wonderland to this day. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the dandelions and the tiger lilies are just much more inventive.
Yes, that's exactly the word. But then again, the flowers, I mean, it really is like all those bitchy elephants.
Like, they have this beautiful song where I'm like, oh, somebody's actually being nice to her for once, okay. And then they just turn on her and she has to run away again. I mean, it's just a series of antagonistic moments.
That's really what that should be the subtitle to this movie. A series of antagonistic moments toward a child.
Yeah, because the next thing she comes to is the caterpillar.
Who is an asshole? God.
Yeah, I mean, again, he is a very beloved character. People love this caterpillar. He's an asshole. He is terrible. The actor, again, very well known. Richard Hayden. Who, his most famous other role that I saw was that he's in The Sound of Music. He's Uncle Max in The Sound of Music.
Okay.
I mean, he's somebody that when I'm, like, scrolling through his filmography, even if I haven't seen that movie, I know it. And so people knew this guy and they knew his voice. But it's just very much that whole, like, who?
Yes.
Oh my god. Like, it's just one of those where you're like, stop doing a shtick. And he's blowing the smoke rings directly in her face.
Also, I will say, when you're coming up to him, you're hearing, like, vaguely Eastern music.
Yeah.
It's honestly kind of what you would hear from, let's say, a Russian composer. Their idea of what Eastern music is. And so it is like, it's a decidedly Russian Eastern music. And the caterpillar's smoking a hookah.
Right. And his shoes have the little curled ends on them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I was just like, okay.
Yeah. But it's another one where Disney just brought that over from the book.
Yep.
Because I've seen, again, the illustrations of the caterpillar, the way that he's drawn and the way his character is done. That idea of it being an Eastern vibe probably is just coming from the fact that it was an 1860s Victorian gentleman who wrote the original story.
Yes, I think that's probably exactly it.
It's the kind of thing where, like, I can't necessarily attribute intentional conscious malice to it.
Right.
Because I think that it's actually the thoughtlessness of it that's the problem.
No, I think that's very well said. I think that's it. But again, and we don't need to go into all of that, but it is the same thing.
It is very much. The caterpillar, they're trying to do a thing with it. I am glad that at least Alice is coughing every time the smoke hits her face. At least they're acknowledging that smoke makes people cough.
Yes.
You know, where he's blowing the smoke and it's got the crocodiles. I wrote that had real pink elephant vibes. I think that actually came in quite a bit. I started to notice it in a few places. And it was something where I was thinking about sort of the evolution of how, at this point, Disney can start referencing themselves. You know, when they're making Snow White and Pinocchio, there's nothing in feature-length animation. I'm not saying they're the first, but there's very, very little for them to look at and be inspired by and draw from and everything. So they're drawing from, like, a whole bunch of other places. But at this point, they are starting to reference themselves. Because it very much, those crocodiles felt like pink elephants. A lot of things about that whole scene felt like pink elephants. Yeah, where he's just like, one side will make you larger and one side will make you small. Which, of course, is the line that was adapted into that song, which is in, like, all the Matrix trailers and everything. He's an ass about that, too.
He's just a jerk.
He says this, like, super vague thing about, like, one side will make you larger and one side will make you small. And she's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, how do you not understand what I'm talking about? I'm talking about the mushroom, you idiot.
Yeah.
How would she know that? Why would she?
Why?
And, of course, the mushroom is the consistency of, like, a souffle for no reason.
Which is better than actual mushrooms, so I'm not going to complain about that.
I mean, honestly, mushrooms I don't like at all. They look and feel weird.
Yep.
But yeah, so she pulls up these two pieces, and she's just like, I mean, she goes all out. She's just gonna lick random strange mushrooms.
You shouldn't, though. You really shouldn't, friends.
Do not.
Don't do it.
If you are very, very knowledgeable about identifying mushrooms, you still should wash them first.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that she puts them in her pockets. And she's like, I might need this.
Yeah, she's thinking ahead.
But then, right after that, is where she meets the Chesire Cat for the first time.
Yep.
The Cheshire Cat, who is singing a jaunty tune of a couple of the lines from Jabberwocky, which, by the way, has been stuck in my head since Saturday. It's Thursday now. Half the time, when there's, like, nothing going on in my world, my brain is going, and the mum brass. And I'm like, dude, I didn't even like it.
Yeah.
Like, why is it there? Because the Jabberwocky poem is one of those things where, like, a lot of the words in it are nonsense words. They don't mean anything. They're not meant to mean anything. But I have never felt that the tone of that was a jaunty little song.
Right.
The way that the Cheshire Cat is singing it. I really don't understand that choice. even the way that, like, it feels torture putting it into the melody the way they do.
Yeah, for me watching this, I was just like, this just feels weird.
Yeah.
Everything's not, I wouldn't go so far as to say sinister, but everything just has this weird edge of antagonism to it, maybe.
Wonderland is not a happy place.
No, it's not wonder at all. It's just weird. It's creepy.
And the Cheshire Cat, like, I mean, you know, he's a cat.
He is an a-hole of a cat. Yep.
We have probably established that I love cats and I am a cat person. If we have not, there we go. I am. I have had things like shirts with the Cheshire Cat on it and stuff. He's been the character that, like, I would be most drawn to because he's got that fun, like, the pink and purple stripes. He disappears where, like, the pink parts disappear and then the purple, like, ravels up like a ribbon. There's a lot of fun stuff that they do with that. But the voice is Winnie the Pooh.
Yes.
It's Sterling Holloway doing what will become the Winnie the Pooh voice. Once you hear it, you can't hear anything else, so it's a little odd. It's not what I expect. But also, the Cheshire Cat's a dick.
He is an a-hole. I mean, again, all these characters are such jerks to this child.
Now, he's a jerk the way I would expect a cat to be a jerk.
Yeah.
In a way where he's just, like, a little tricky, a little self-serving. He's not outright, like, I don't think that he's doing anything. The caterpillar, it felt like he was just angry at her or something. Yeah. Like, there was something weird there. I think the Cheshire Cat is just, he's the jokester. He's kind of like a Loki kind of character, the trickster god sort of idea.
I will also say, he is the one who is like, no, it's the queen. Everything goes the queen's way. And she's like, wait, what?
I'm trying to find my way home. And he's like, well, all ways are the queen's ways.
Yeah, and she's like, who? But he is the one who, like, kind of gives her the clue as to what has to happen to get home. And so he's not 100% bad, but they are all just kind of childishly jerks.
He's got his own reasons for doing it, I guess. But yeah, I mean, he does actually give her direction and he does actually give her information.
Right. But you're right, though. He is kind of a trickster because he's doing it to watch the fallout. So
yeah. One thing that we both noticed is that the line in the movie...
Yeah, the most everyone's mad here. You may have noticed that I'm not all there myself.
Right. Most everyone's mad here is what he says in the movie. And you and I both were like, but everything we've seen, like all the t-shirts, all the mugs, all of the like cross-stitch patterns, everything says we're all mad here.
Right.
I did look it up because Alice in Wonderland, the book, is in the public domain. If anybody wants to have a very long, very fun public domain conversation, I'm here for it. In the book, he does say, Alice says, but I don't want to go among mad people. Oh, you can't help that. We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad.
Yes.
How do you know I'm mad? You must be, or you wouldn't have come here.
Right. And that's a weird thing to change.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I think that most everyone's mad here. It's just an odd... It doesn't flow.
No.
The way, like, we're all mad here is on the t-shirts because it's a really good line.
Yeah, exactly that. It works. And they were like, you know what? Let's make this clunkier.
Right. And most everyone. Okay, well, who's sane in this world? Because it's nobody.
Right. Well, the dodo.
Well, I guess some of the cards aren't bad.
No.
And now, the visual joke of I'm not all there myself.
And then he's disappearing. Yes.
Big fan.
It's that kind of thing that it's just like, it's the obvious one and also the right one. And do it.
It's like, let's go. Let's do that. But he sends her to the Mad Hatter.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's probably 100% common knowledge, but just in case.
Yeah.
The idea of a Mad Hatter is because of the phrase mad as a hatter, which was common in Victorian times because hatters used to use mercury when they were making hats, and they got mercury poisoning, and they would actually go insane.
Yes.
Short version, I'm sure there's like a stuff you missed in history or stuff you should know. Like, all of those kind of podcasts have probably done entire episodes about it. So go look that up if you hadn't heard that before.
Right.
So, anyway, that's where the Mad Hatter's character comes from. Dark origin, yada yada. The Mad Hatter as a character, first of all, very enduring.
Mm-hmm.
I think they probably have him as a character, one of the characters that walks around the park. He's much more famous than the March Hare, for whatever reason, I guess because he has more lines. But, again, drawn as like just a Disney-fied version of the original illustration. The original illustrations, he's a little more sinister looking.
Yeah.
And a little creepier. This is definitely a more like cartoon idea of it. Another one where the voice actor, I think people would have known him, Ed Wynn was the actor. And when I looked up his IMDb, first of all, his IMDb is incredibly long. And there were just several things that I recognized. When I saw his face, I was like, yeah, I know that guy.
Right.
He's just one of those people where he's that guy in a lot of things. You know, I read this really sweet quote from, I think it was Red Skelton from when Edwin died that said that his death was the only time he ever made anyone sad.
Oh, yeah.
So apparently the voice actor was actually a really, really lovely person, but also a very, very experienced vaudeville comic who had been doing this for a long, long time. And so he was one of the ones that was doing a lot of improvisation, including the scene where he destroys the rabbit's watch. And again, people just not paying any attention to the poor rabbit and destroying his things. But also the whole thing where he keeps being like, move seats or change seats, move around. Like, I don't remember what the line is. Where Alice is just like, I haven't had any tea yet. They just keep moving and she keeps not being able to have any tea. And apparently in the book, there's this whole thing about like the Mad Hatter angered time itself so that it's perpetually tea time for him. Whatever the reason is, he's in this perpetual tea party. It's a frustrating scene as a grown-up.
It is. My whole takeaway, I hated the part where they are destroying the rabbit's watch. I hated that part because my father's a watchmaker.
Oh, yeah.
Gosh, I was watching it. I was like, don't do that. And yeah, the whole time the poor white rabbit is like, no, stop, that's my watch. And they're just like, nope.
Yeah, like, I need that. And they're like, no, we're going to slap butter and sugar and all of this other stuff in it. I mean, he says something like, well, your watch has wheels in it. That's the problem. And I'm like,
too many wheels.
The Mad Hatter is a fun character. Like, I'm not, as much as he did a bunch of things that made me mad, pun not intended, he's got this, like, voice that he's putting on.
There's like a sweetness to him. Yeah.
He's got a voice that he's doing that's very much like a cartoon voice of the time. Like it's like an Elmer Fudd kind of vibe. He's got, like, his look is just very, like, it just feels, like I said, the merry melodies, the silly symphonies.
He feels a little harmless. Yeah.
He feels like he's just a little bumbling. And, like I said, On Birthday's the best song in the whole movie.
Yep, it is.
And he and the Marchero are the ones that sing it. It comes to mind all the time for me. It's got a great tune. It's just very singable. It's got a way better tune than the Happy Birthday song.
In a way, the Mad Hatter reminds me a little bit of Belle's father.
Yeah.
But the way he is done, there are other versions of the story, but it's specifically the animated one, where he's not crazy, but he comes across as crazy, whereas this is sort of, he actually is a bit crazy.
That sort of nutty professor. Yeah. The March Hare gets forgotten, but he's about the same. He doesn't have as many jokes. His jokes aren't as funny. The Dormouse, at this point, starts competing with the White Rabbit for being the animal most like me. Because I did have a moment where I was like, is the Dormouse sleepy or drunk? He's sleepy.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, Dormouse.
Yes.
You and
me both, friend. Yeah.
We're on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
It's a scene that scene, specifically, I think is the one that people remember the most from the whole movie. And for good reason. It's a good song. It's got a lot of good acting. It's got good character design. It's got good animation. They've got, like, the wacky teacups. He's got, like, the teapot that's got the 3 spouts.
Yes, which I could use one of those. I mean, I understand that it doesn't work that way, but I liked it.
That's whimsical aesthetic to that scene is, I think, what most people who love Alice in Wonderland, that's what they pull and remember.
Yes, they don't remember that everybody's a jerk.
You know, I think that's one of the reasons that the Mad Hatter is the one that gets beefed up a lot. Also because he's one of the only characters that has more than a thin veneer of anything. The White Rabbit is just always late and he works for the Queen. Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I wonder if a 7 or 8-year-old watching it would feel that antagonism in that scene that we're picking up on.
Yeah, I don't know.
The Hatter, it's not even just like with the dodo, like completely disrespecting the White Rabbit. He's disrespecting everybody in that scene. And he's just really like just not paying attention to anyone else. And so that scene and the frustration of being like, will somebody, like Alice just being like, will you just listen to me? I have not had a cup of tea.
Yeah.
As an adult, I'm feeling that in a way that I just really think a 7-year-old is not going to notice.
I think it depends on the kid's life experience. Because I do think there are instances where, especially recently, when my daughter gets frustrated with me for things, she's like, you're not listening to me. You need to trust me.
Yeah.
You know, you feel Alice's frustration. And at the end of the scene, she says, no more nonsense. And amen. Thank you, Alice. I'm with you, because if I sat through that, my head would pop off of my body and just explode.
I think at one point in my notes, I was like, Alice, you specifically wished for all of this. You named it as what you wanted to have happen. I was being a jerk. Because it is very much a thing where, like, and especially kids, how many adults do you know where, like, when I was young, I couldn't wait to grow up and be in charge of myself, and now I really wish I could go back and have someone else make my lunch for me.
Totally. Oh, there were so many times when Ingrid was very young where she would get frustrated with some rule in our household, and she would say, I would say things like, well, I'm sorry, but mommies make the rules. And she would say, right. I cannot wait till I'm a grown-up and I have babies too, so I can make the rules too.
I will joke with people sometimes about how, like, again, you know, I was the youngest of 3, and I always had an extreme independence streak. Mm-hmm. And so I will joke with people that I started trying to move out of my parents' house when I was 6. And then, I mean, I'm not going to say that, like, I actually loved living alone. Like, it was fantastic. I didn't love having bills.
Right, right.
When you're like, when I am older, or when I have power, or when I'm in charge, or when I make the rules, this is how I want it to be. And then you get there and you're just like, oh, that was a bad idea. I mean, the whole point of this, if this movie has a point, that is it.
Yes.
Alice learning that you can't have a world of only nonsense.
Yes, and that reckoning for her is very lonely, honestly, as a mother. As anybody, it's hard to watch, but as like a mother kind of putting your kid in that place, it's very hard to watch. I was just like, oh.
I mean, that scene, it's in the art, it's in the voice acting, it's in all of the choices that they made to get there. That scene has a loneliness to it that is palpable. It comes across 100%. Again, I don't know why she's singing.
Just to shoehorn it into the song.
Yeah, they turned it into a song for whatever reason. It's not a bad song.
Mm-hmm.
The voice actress for Alice, who, you know, we'll meet again next time because she's also Wendy in Peter Pan, Catherine Beaumont. I watched a little tidbit extra that's on Disney Plus about a song that actually was written for Alice in Wonderland, and then they gave it new lyrics and put it in Peter Pan because it didn't work in Alice. But she says, I was never a good singer, but I especially wasn't back then. You know, it is kind of a sing-talking song. It's not showing off a lot of vocal talent. But it doesn't matter because, like I said, it's this... Her acting in that scene comes across. The way that it's drawn, it comes across. The little pencil birds and the glasses birds and all of the weird little strange tiny creatures she's run into over the last, 5 minutes wandering through these woods. I'm wondering how much of these random little things are from the book and how much is just the animators being like, I need to draw a weird thing. It's very imaginative and it's very interesting. But they all come and they're all watching her and they're getting sad with her and their body language is very low. And it's a very, very well done scene. And that's one of the reasons that when I look at this movie and I'm like, where am I on this? I come out on the positive side of it.
Right.
Because it's got things like that where it does all just come together.
I feel the same way, even though I personally didn't really like the movie. I think it's because I am so different from that kind of person that watching this movie stresses me out. You know what I mean? But I can come away from it and look at it and be like, well, the animation alone is worth the price of admission. And there are so many things that are just really beautifully done. And there are some parts like this, scenes like this, where it's just like, okay, this brings us to where we're finally going to meet the queen.
And the last, I wasn't looking at the timer.
15 minutes left in the movie at this point. It's an hour and 21. But really, I think that's the Disney timing on it because it ends and there's still 7 minutes left after the story ends. And so really, we're talking about an hour and 15.
Yeah, it says 75 minutes on the Disney Wiki.
Yeah, that is more accurate.
So it's 75 minutes. You do not have that much left. And the Red Queen is finally here.
Yes.
You have the second best song of the movie, Painting the Roses Red. A song that I sing in my head probably every time I see a red rose, come to think of it, or a white rose. Or anytime I'm painting anything red. It's just it's a song that pops into my head a lot because it's just, again, jaunty, memorable. It's, what's the word they use for earworms, is sticky.
Yeah, totally.
The cards are fun characters. They're drawn in a really fun way. Again, probably hearkening right back to the illustrations.
I'm sure.
But they're fun. The idea of, you haven't met this queen yet. The only thing you know is the Cheshire Cat has said all ways are the queen's ways.
Not only have you not met her, you only just found out about her.
Right. Saying all ways are the queen's ways, when you know what's going to come with the Red Queen, you sort of already put a sinister note to that. But, Victorian England...
Always were the queen's ways, too. That's just how it is.
Then the first thing we really get, where we're getting any idea of who she is the song where they're like, we accidentally planted white rose bushes, and she is going to execute us for that.
Right.
Of course, all the lyrics have left my head right now. I know they say, like, something like, not pink, not green, not aquamarine, because that's a clever rhyme. That's way better than houses and trousers. They're just like, she'll just be off with our heads, so we have to paint the roses red. That right there is everything about the Queen's character
that you need to know.
You've got it. It's right there. You're already there. And it's given to you in this song that's very cheery.
Yes, it is very remarkably upbeat for what they're saying.
And she joins them because Alice is actually a helpful person. That's another thing. There's a lot of characterizations in other adaptations where they make Alice like kind of a brat.
Yeah.
Getting in people's way, and she's really selfish. In this version anyway, she's not like that at all. And she's a little self-centered.
Well, find me a 10-year-old who isn't. I mean, they can't help it. It's not like they're all jerks. It's just how they're children.
Right. And so she's just like, oh, well, A, painting roses red sounds fun, and B, I don't want you guys to die. I mean, I just met you, but that doesn't sound like a good way to go. So she starts helping. That's great. But then, the Queen shows up. When the cards come out in that first part, that was another part where I was like, this feels very Pink Elephants, and even the music. She shows up. She's got that great character design. Verna Felton is just like, she is playing it for all that it's worth. And I think that this is probably not the first time they've done this with her characterization. And again, I haven't read the book since I was a teenager, but I really enjoy the way that her attitude turns on a dime.
Mm-hmm.
And how that becomes what her character is. And it is something that they have done in almost every representation of the Red Queen ever since.
Yes.
She is, like, super sweet and really nice. And she's like, oh, everything's lovely. Off with your head. Mood swings.
Yes.
That's fun to me.
I thought it was funny. Also, I was just like, is she really that? There are some moments where she is played for kind of an idiot.
Yeah.
Is she that dumb? And is this really about how pointless and self-important and deluded royalty actually are?
I think it feels that way.
Yeah.
And maybe this is other adaptations coloring my vision, because I think, again, going back to that Adventures in Wonderland when I was rewatching it, the Queen in that one is played as a much more like, she's a little selfish, she's a little bossy. She's also not that bad. She's in charge of these people. And she doesn't treat them that terribly. So they sort of play it a lot of times as her being just a little bit clueless.
Clueless is the right word. And then it's funny, though, because when Alice is big, so spoiler alert, she pulls those mushroom pieces out of her pockets. Why she eats both of them simultaneously, I don't understand, because she should know better by now. But she eats one, she gets huge,
right,
and she starts to go off on the Queen. And then suddenly she's shrinking, and she's like, oh, crap. It's just funny, but she goes through this, and she's basically saying all the things that we have seen about the Queen.
Right.
Where she kind of overvalues her opinions. And
you have the whole thing, like, after she teaches Alice how to curtsy, and says, like, well, you should curtsy while you're thinking, it saves time. That is such a royal thing to say.
Yes.
They're going to play croquet, which probably was in the book because croquet was going through a huge fad at that point. Because Alice obviously knows how to play croquet because she's a well-off little girl in Victorian England. The flamingos as croquet mallets is just hilarious. The whole thing of Alice's flamingo, like, flopping around, like, that bit.
Yes.
Still makes me laugh. The flamingo design actually is almost identical to what's going to come back in Fantasia 2000 when we get there. And then they have the little hedgehog as the ball, the cards as the wickets. And because all of these things are alive, the Queen is terrible.
Right.
I love the king, like, nudging the hedgehog. No. Now this is when we do what she needs to see to puff up her ego. All the cards are hopping to be over the hedgehog. The hedgehog is, like, rolling a little extra. Yeah. He rolls even though she misses. And then, of course, when Alice goes, after she finally gets her hedgehog to move, all of the cards, like, one of them flattens itself.
They're dodging out of the way, yeah.
It cracks me up because it is very much that, like, it comes across to me like the spoiled rich kids in other, like, Willy Wonka. There's a little bit of the Queen just being like, she also feels a little bit like she's 10 or 12 years old. Absolutely.
She's very childlike in that her expectations are on me all the time. I'm going to win at everything.
Only she has the power to behead people.
Yeah, I'm going to win at everything because it's my divine right.
Right.
So you mentioned the king.
Tiny little king
who looks like Cogsworth.
He does. Oh my God, that's what it was. Because I spent the whole time being like, he looks exactly like somebody else. His character design is exactly like something else, and I couldn't place it. You're right, he's Cogsworth.
He looks like Cogsworth, which, okay, great. I love seeing these little things.
That was sort of the point of the whole project, in a way. of watching it in order and seeing the threads and seeing how they start to
Yeah, and
up.
where they start to get self-referential. Well, here we are. We've already had a Gaston in Brown Bones.
Right.
What is Belle's father's name? Maurice. I knew it was something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of get a glimpse of him in the Mad Hatter, and we're seeing all these things suddenly show up, coincidentally or not.
And I think that Disney does self-referential better than a lot of other places do. If it's not organic and it doesn't make sense and it doesn't work, I don't want it there. And I think that Disney actually started to do these things, and I think that they're doing them in very organic ways that I'm really appreciating. And things like the sort of musical notes that are really reminiscent of Pink Elephants, and the animation in the flowers that is very much like the Nutcracker Suite section of Fantasia.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot of things like that, where they're like, we did this and it really worked. So let's do it because it works. It would work here too, and it does. Maybe we'll get to a point where it doesn't. There was something weird for me watching The Queen when she decides that it's off with Alice's head, and he's like, oh, wouldn't it be fun to have a trial?
Right.
Like, it's his idea that they should have a trial because he gets to preside over the trial, and I think he's just having fun with it.
It also feels like he's trying to save Alice.
I'm not sure if that's what they're trying to do with him, that he's trying to save her or not, because once they get to the trial, he gets a little weird.
But he tries to stem the flow again.
He does try to calm her down.
Yeah, and he's like, no, we need to call witnesses.
Don't forget the procedure. We forgot to mention that the whole reason that Alice ends up on the Queen's bad side and she's on trial is because of the Cheshire Cat.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those moments where I'm like, oh, he's such a jerk. But again, it just really feels like he's a trickster.
Yeah.
He's the kind of character that just stirs things up like that. But that whole chase where she's running away from the cards and everyone's running after her is how she gets home.
Yes, that is exactly it. And she kind of peeks back through the door, and the doorknob is like, no, you've been out there the whole time.
You're already there.
Yeah. My thing was, she's going through all this to escape, and it is kind of like you said, you're getting what you wanted, Alice. You wanted this kind of Wonderland, which turns out to be kind of chaos. And then at the end, you're like, oh no, it turns out that I really like order. It turns out I would like to go home where I thought I was unhappy. I didn't know how good I had it. There's a lesson there. But also, there are a couple times where you look at that and it's like, this feels a little cynical. It loses the fantasy aspect.
Mm-hmm.
If you step back from the lesson and really kind of look at it, you're like,
The book very specifically made waves because it wasn't trying to teach a Victorian moral lesson.
Right.
So this is me sort of trying to kludge what I know about storytelling and structure onto a movie that is based on a book that very specifically rejected that. So, okay. But Disney movies have morals.
Yes.
And we all know it. What is the moral of this? Because it does feel like the ending is trying to say to put away your childish things.
Exactly. And it feels that way. That is exactly how I took it. You just put words to the idea that I couldn't. It does feel like also it's possible that it was just like, oh, I didn't realize how good I had it.
Yeah.
Because when she wakes up and the person we now know is her sister, she starts reciting the crocodile poem instead of the one that she knew, and she says something like, oh, but the caterpillar said, and her sister's like, oh, for crying out loud. Clearly, she has not really been changed.
She makes a comment about, maybe I'll write it down in a book. I like the idea of, an epilogue where Alice does become a children's book author. Where, she learns that nonsense has its place, but that you need order in certain places and certain aspects of life. Which is the truth. That is the lesson that is hard to learn as you grow up, and that balance is very hard to find, and almost everybody spends their whole life trying to do it. It's not necessarily something that's very simple to put in at the tail end of this. I think it's something where I would be a little happier if the moral was more clearly that imagination and fun has its place and it's fun to do, but that you don't want to live your life that way entirely.
Yes. Also, possibly at the time, if you put this story in its original context, maybe that message is coming through clearer because of all the other stuff that was happening. Maybe it was just like, well, everybody already knew this, and so then here's this story.
I found these quotes about the way that it changed literature when the book came out. One of the ones that I really loved was, his name looks like Walter Besant.
Yes.
A book of that extremely rare kind which will belong to all the generations to come until the language becomes obsolete.
Yeah.
Prescient, because yes. But there was a guy in 1932, so well before this movie came out, that said that Alice ended an era of didacticism in children's literature, inaugurating a new era in which writing for children aimed to delight or entertain.
Right.
I saw a thing where it talked about, I want to say they called them nonsense poems or something. But there were several things where it said that, like, this is the first example of this thing. This book invented genres.
Yeah, totally.
So you've got something like the Jabberwocky, where there's just a bunch of words in it that don't mean anything. And really the idea of it is that it's about a feeling more than the literal meaning. There's also a poem, and I don't remember if it's the first or second book, I think it's called The Dormouse's Tale, where the poem itself is written like a tail, like a mouse tail across the page.
Oh, cute.
It is one of the first examples, if not the first example, of using typography in poetry that way. When you start studying modern poetry and the things that start coming not long after that, early 1900s into like the 1950s and 60s, that must have been like a bomb going off in the world of poetry.
Right. Yeah, totally.
I can't imagine a world where this story and this book don't exist. And I don't want to, because there are so many things to love about it. And so many places. If you go on Wikipedia and you just go to the section that's like adaptations or inspirations or like in popular culture or whatever they call that, even just the list of songs that are partially inspired by, like, literally the song I Am the Walrus by the Beatles.
Right.
This is something that has become so much a part of who we are as a society that it's been adapted so many times. I mentioned that TV movie that I loved that was like mid-80s, I want to say. There's also like a Sci-Fi Channel miniseries that was like it's kind of a gritty reboot idea, but I remember it actually being better than I made that sound. It's just something that we keep coming back to as a society. And I had like kind of a half-finished thought in the notes. I think the reason, though, that a lot of the adaptations are failing in a way that this one succeeds is because I think they try to make it have a plot that we understand as a plot.
Right.
I don't think Alice in Wonderland was ever intended to do that.
No, I think you're absolutely right.
And I don't think that it really works when you do it.
Yes.
We've kind of skirted around this. I think we've pretty much said it. But general feeling, do we even recommend this movie? I say yes.
Yeah.
I think that you just kind of need to know what you're going to get. It doesn't have a plot. It's got beautiful animation. It's got really great voice acting. I think it's a good watch.
I agree. You know, I didn't love it, but it's partly just a personality thing for me. I did love the animation. Basically, it was the characters I hated.
Right.
There was a lot that I liked about it. I did not like the characters, and I don't like this style of story where it just really a lot happens but nothing happens. For all those things considered, I'm still on board with it.
Like, at the end of a movie, I'm always like, why were we here? Why did I spend an hour of my life with that? With this one, the answer is really, it was entertaining and it was nice to look at. And there doesn't have to be more than that. There's so many quotes in it that are so good. I want to reread the book now. It's enjoyable. I had a good time. And I can't say that about a lot of other adaptations of the same story. I think that speaks to Disney's ability.
Yes. And I think, honestly, I think some of what helps it is that he bought the artwork. Enough people were like, oh yes, I literally recognize this story.
Like you said, people who read the book first, this is very beloved. This is, I'm trying to do the math in my head, it's like 90 years after the book has come out. Literally, they made the first film adaptation a couple years after film and motion pictures as we know it was invented.
Right. Yeah.
It was 1903. And the first, like, what we would think of as a public exhibition of film was in 1895. So it's not even 10 years that they wait before they start adapting this. Everybody knows this story. It's a recommend. I think it's fun. It's one of those movies that's a little weird. You gotta know what you're getting into. Or, I mean, I think from pop culture, everybody knows what they're getting into with Alice in Wonderland. I think it's hard not to.
Right. Unless you're me.
Next time.
Peter Pan.
I don't think either one of us is looking forward to it.
Nope.
Also, it's back to us being a Racism and Disney podcast.
Alrighty. We're
going to get through it, and then we'll get to better things.
Yes.
Revisiting the Vault is a 9-Hour Films production, and it's edited by Mary Ratliff. Our music is by Music Motion and Lynn Publishing. We are not affiliated with or authorized by the Walt Disney Company. You can find us on Twitter at Revisit the Vault, and you can find our website at revisitingthevault.com. Don't forget to check out our Patreon. Patrons can get personalized thank you cards, stickers, and access to deleted scenes and outtakes. You can find that over at patreon.com/9hourfilms. If you want to support us, the best thing you can do is to tell other people about the show, and make sure that you leave a review in whatever app you're using to listen. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.